So Cody, maybe just some orienting information about yourself, name, year, major, stuff like that.
Sure. What's up, guys? Check, check, check. Oh, yeah. My fault. I'm Cody. I'm a senior here, chemical engineering major. That's it, huh? Good to be with y'all.
So Cody, I think has the amongst his friends, I think he has the greatest difference between when you first meet him and when you actually get to know him. So you can interpret however you like. Do you have a claim to fame?
Oh,
Fun fact about yourself.
I think a lot of y'all in the room might know me as the guy who drives the minivan. Yeah, I don't know. I like to give rides like that. I think just looking around the room, I've had a lot of y'all over at my apartment. Love to cook, love to drive. Yeah.
Yeah. And if you've seen his apron,
Oh, yeah.
yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so just wanted to kind of capture a little bit of your story, I guess. So, I think for you to sign up to kind of your first year after graduation, to serve on the farm mission field, I think is pretty amazing. So, just want to kind of capture a little bit of your story. So what would be like, I don't know, a story that captures what you were like before becoming Christian?
Yeah, growing up, I grew up in a Christian household, but my view of what Christian life was supposed to be was just to generally be kind and love other people, but not much beyond that. And so what my life was really about was I was a very trying to maximize and optimize everything kind of person, very ambitious. I just wanted to chase after everything. So grades, took like 10 APs, just trying to get A's in everything. I was ASB president, chased after all those things. There was a period in time where I, thought the next thing I needed was to get in like really good shape. So I went on this crazy journey of like losing a ton of weight and then going to the gym and getting strong in like 4 a.m. gym sessions and just like demon hours. So like, needless to say, like I was a very ambitious person driven by trying to chase after achieving and accomplishing all these different things.
So I remember a long car ride that we had where you just kind of walk through all of that, and I thought that was like pretty. So yeah, so like okay, so you mentioned how you felt like okay, I needed to like really get in shape and stuff like that. If you don't mind, kind of sharing, what was it like before that, and then what kind of prompted you to go on that journey, and then yeah.
Yeah. At that point, I would already be getting a lot of these things. I had a bunch of friends. I was involved in the student government since like elementary school. My school system was super rigorous. So we're already in all the advanced classes. So academics, socially, like I had all that. But I was always like one of the bigger kids growing up. And so, like for anyone who had that experience, that kind of does something to you growing up like that. And then so, around the middle school times, that's when you really start to feel it. And then early high school, I just got so caught up in a lot of my schoolwork that like I started to get like bigger. And so like there was a point my sophomore year, I was just straight up like 210 and like not big at all. Like I was just fat. And so at that point, I was like, man, this like sucks and I got to do something. And that was right around the time that COVID hit. So worked well. I had all the time in the world. And so at that point, that was just another one of those things that it's like, all right, this is the next thing for me to tackle. And so I just locked in like for 7 months, I think. I was just as strict on myself as possible in terms of diet and exercise. And I dropped all the way down to 140. So that was 70 pounds in like 6 or 7 months, which was kind of insane. And like the stuff that I was putting myself through to get to that was probably not healthy. But then, I got that. I achieved what I wanted there. And then twofold. At first, I'd look in the mirror at 140 and I'd still like not be happy. Like the body dysmorphia was pretty tough. And so when those numbers started to plateau, that was kind of discouraging. But then after seeing some friends a little bit later, that mindset flipped on the exact opposite side. I was like, man, I'm too scrawny now. And so, I did what I wanted, but then I wasn't happy. So then I started hitting the gym, trying to bulk up again. And then, like I said, demon hours, 3, 4, 5 in the morning, hitting PRs like all the time, taking 600 milligrams of caffeine pre-workout, just grinding. And, kept doing that, kept that up for a bit. And even with all the PRs I'd hit and whatever, I still wouldn't really be satisfied when I looked at myself. And so even like objectively looking and seeing me hitting these benchmarks that I was wanting, that wasn't what was going to be satisfying to me. And I had to learn that the hard way over multiple times of reaching the thing that I wanted and now having the next thing to go after right after that.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. That's pretty. Okay. So, you hit a certain point, was not satisfied. You hit another point, not satisfied. Hit another point, not satisfied. So, I guess, how does now your journey with Christ and Christianity like kind of intersect with all of that?
Yeah. So similarly around that time, during COVID, I kind of fell out of church. I was just tired of hopping on Zooms. And so with that, stopped going to church, stopped praying, stopped reading my Bible. These all came one after the other. And then senior year, I felt kind of ashamed of that. So I chose not to come back when things started to reopen, which is at which point, coming to college, I realized, intellectually, I don't have problems with my faith. And so I wanted to put more priority back into coming to church and things like that. And also at that time, it was just, a lot of disillusionment, realizing that achieving these things, with my body weren't satisfying to me. And then getting to UCLA was a temporary high, and then that wasn't super satisfying to me. And then even things with socially and friendships, there's just so many struggles. And that was really breaking a lot of these things that I thought, man, this is what is going to be making me happy, and yet I keep getting the things I want, and it's not turning out. And so I was at a pretty kind of low point coming into my freshman year winter quarter. I wasn't super excited to come to school. I was just like, man, this kind of sucks, and now I'm going to be doing this for 11 more quarters. Wow, and I just get to go study more. Okay. But it was also at that time where kind of just by chance, I ended up coming to a winter retreat. And I had no intent to come. I didn't really know what was happening. I wasn't that tapped in. But then, some of my friends were just happened to be talking about it. And I thought it was too late to sign up. I was able to sign up somehow. And so coming to that retreat was very clarifying to me. I heard a message about lordship. And the main premise of that message was saying that, a lot of us think that what we're supposed to do in our life is, divide everything up in like a pie chart. And there's different sections for different aspects of our life, for school, for work, for relationships, for money. And so often what we try to do is make a slice of that pie set out for God. And maybe we think living a good Christian life means trying to make that slice as big as possible. Let God take up this much of my life, and then here are the other aspects. But what the preacher explained was that, actually, no, that's not what giving God lordship of our life looks like, but rather, God needs to be at the center of that pie, reaching out into all of the slices, reaching out into all of those areas in my life and informing my decisions and how I choose to act and how I view these different things. And at that moment, it was so clear to me that, wow, I hadn't been living my Christian life like that. And there's actually a lot more here that I haven't even been touching. And so at that point, I wanted to make a commitment to make Jesus the Lord of my life. And then from there was a lot of growth that's happened since then, a lot of learning. But that's what started it all off.
Amen. Okay, so how did the lordship of Christ kind of transform you internally?
Yeah, I think coming off of that retreat, kind of similar to a lot of the things I shared about growing up, but that, as with most things, I was very zealous for. Immediately coming back, I wanted to start doing all sorts of things, trying to stir up my peers and do stuff with them. So we would do Bible studies together. We'd go on prayer walks. And that was kind of my heart, is I wanted to grow in my faith because I learned there was a lot that, I hadn't been doing. And I wanted to do that with my friends. And then somewhere in all of that, I signed up to go to a mission trip over the summer to Thailand. So
this was between your freshman and sophomore year?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So late freshman year, there was a sign up. I don't know what was going on in my head because I do not to this day remember signing up for that. It wasn't until later.
The Holy Spirit overcame you.
Something actually, because closer to May or June, we have a info meeting, and I'm like, wait, why did I what? And I hadn't really thought about it, and I don't think it actually hit me until probably closer to the time that we were going to fly out for those 2 weeks. But that was my first time ever sharing the gospel with anybody. I'd never done that before. Even, up here, once I started learning about what Christian faith looks like, I hadn't shared the gospel with any of my friends or anything like that. And so all of a sudden, there I was in a foreign country, out trying to tell people about God and Jesus. And so that was unexpected and unplanned. And, I don't know how I got there. But over that trip and having that experience, that really broke my heart for the fact that there's so many people out there who don't know God and who are living the same kind of dark cycle of life that I had been, chasing after these things that they think are going to make them happy. And really, the human experience is that none of those things do fulfill. And so I saw myself in that. I remember there was this one time where early on in our trip, we went to this shrine, and a bunch of people are paying good money to enter in and to bring offerings to the shrine, and they're praying there. And that was also such a clear moment to me. I felt so broken to see all of these people praying to a God who I knew couldn't hear them. And that really did something. And so for the rest of that trip, man, my heart was just going out to all these people that we were meeting, because I knew that what they needed in their lives to fill this is Jesus. And so I was able to see that clearly, with a 92.5% Buddhist country, 1.2% Christian. It's very clear to see. But then even coming back here at the start of my sophomore year, kind of transformed how I saw UCLA as well. All of my friends here who aren't Christians, all of my classmates, all of my neighbors and stuff, I see all these people. And now, before I used to have the mask of, oh no, it's a nice campus and there's a lot of Christian exposure in America. But at that point, I was pretty clearly able to see, no, it's the same exact situation out here. And so from that point, my heart has been broken for trying to do ministry.
So then, okay, so you went to Thailand, kind of transformed your perspective. You shared the gospel for the first time. Following summer, you signed up for Thailand again.
Run it back, yeah.
Yeah. Why? Yeah, tell us about that.
Yeah, so obviously how pivotal that first experience was. When I heard that we'd have an opportunity to go back, I was ready to jump on that. A lot of the people I met out there who I still had contact with, a lot of early Christians in their faith who I got to see become Christian while I was out there, churches out there who were helping, all of these reasons. I was like, man, I have to go back out there, and I'd love to. And so that was a great experience for me as well. Joe was leading that trip, so that was the first time we met. Don't ask him about how that was. I was kind of, yeah. Anyways.
That's when I got to really know Cody.
Oh, yeah. Yep. A bit too much. But that was our first year of our church sending teams like this one out into these countries. And so the first year when we went out, it was just the 40 of us who went out trying to hit campuses. And we were pretty much alone. But this second year, the year after, after my sophomore year, we had a good team out there who had already been doing work. And so it was such a blessing for me getting to experience them, because they hosted us, and immediately when we got there, we were able to hit the ground running. We were able to help them with whatever they'd been up to, whereas the first year, it felt like we spent the first week trying to get our bearings out there in a foreign country. And then on top of that, all of the students who I met, who I had very encouraging conversations with, I had people to hand them over to. And that was such a cool experience to me, because it didn't feel like, oh man, whatever I can do in these 2 weeks is all. I knew that whatever work I was doing there could be continued through having a team out there. And so after that trip, my mindset was pretty clear of, man, if I could ever be part of something like that, that's what I'd want to do, because I was so grateful for them and blessed by them.
Yeah, so he kept bothering me, In some ways, Cody is sort of a trailblazer, because, we've never sent new grads to a foreign country. But he's like, hey, can I go? I'm like, I'll get back to you, Hey, can I go? 2 months later, hey, can I go? I'm like, let me get back to you, But really thankful for your zeal, your persistence, and just wanting to, share the gospel and be a part of that team that can build something, over longer than just 2 weeks, right? But for the whole year. So that's really, really neat. So, okay. So let's flip back now to kind of your time here on campus. You're a senior about to graduate. So you've had these kind of transformational experiences over the summer. How did that sort of affect your time here? I know you touched upon that a little bit, but one thing that I've been really encouraged by is just your evangelistic heart. And so, like this past year, for example, like how did you approach evangelism? Like, what did you end up doing?
Yeah, so I live apartment side, and so we don't have as direct access to campus. Like we're not in the dining halls and stuff like that. But it also comes with a lot of freedoms to try other things. And so one of the things I've been super grateful for is, our apartment is 6 of us guys from this church. And so one of the things we like to do is have people over. That's been such a sweet picture for me of, having some of my non-Christian friends over, or, some of my housemates having their non-Christian friends over, and using that as a way in which we can personally show love to people. They can experience us as a community, and then we can also stir up some spiritual conversations. And so that's been one really sweet one. And then another one, I think one of my favorites is on Fridays, we've been doing an outreach that we call Cold Ones. And so I've been super grateful. The sophomore MCs, they've been there. Some of the other students are pretty regular coming out. But we set up a cooler. We set up some lawn chairs next to Jan's steps. And the premise is we're giving out free drinks. And so for the people who are busy and just passing by, at least for them, they get to see, oh, that was a positive experience with some Christians. That was nice. They gave me something free. But then further, the idea is we're trying to bring people in to have conversations, just to sit and chat with them. And so for the people who were willing to stop by, chat, we've been able to have so many really good spiritual conversations, share the gospel to different people, see a lot of them still have interest. And so for me, that's both encouraging to see the younger ones super excited about doing outreach like this, but then also for myself, after being here a couple years and seeing how this campus is like, it does feel tough sometimes with how academically minded people are. And so to have those fleeting moments of people willing to take some time out of their day to talk, that's just such a sweet picture. Getting to share the gospel in the midst of midterm season or whatever's going on, for people to put that on hold. And then oftentimes the experience that we hear from them is that they're very grateful for us for having those conversations, because never in their time here, even as fourth years I've met who share that they've never been able to have conversations like that in their time here, because everything's just go, go, go. People are so academically driven that nobody's thinking about these deeper questions. And so being able to foster a time where we can have those conversations, start those conversations, get them thinking, have them wanting to follow up and talk more about things like that, I think that's definitely been my favorite way of reaching out to this campus.
Yeah, I'm really thankful that you guys kind of took the time, like space in your calendar to do that. I heard that like a lot of times it's like 4, 5, 6 hours you guys are out there. I guess if no one's around, you're just kind of hanging out and drinking drinks, which is nice too, but yeah. All right, so last question. What would be your advice to some of the undergrads in the room?
I think for those of you who were here last week, it's kind of similar to what Nathan shared. But I'd really encourage you to just start saying yes to some simple things. As I look back at my journey, I'm very grateful for all the ways that God has changed the way I see things. He's changed my heart and how that means I've lived my life. But from where I am now to where I was freshman year didn't happen overnight. It was a series of gradual changes, things that happened over time, things building into other things. And that only started because initially I said yes to doing some things, like that first year trip to Thailand. And so I think, at least with me, one of the easy things is always to have a theoretical yes. I know this is good and I want to do this, but I don't have time right now. Now's not the perfect time, and so I'm going to wait until later to make that decision. But I would challenge you guys to, if there's things like that, just for a short period of time, let's say a week, commit yourself to just saying yes to everything that comes up. Because I know, at least for myself, if I'm going to push it off till the time's right, that time's never going to come. But if I want to be able to put these yeses out there, if I just commit to whatever comes, I'm going to say yes to it, then that takes away the anxiety of having to even make that choice. And from there, I get to see what comes of it. And I would encourage you guys, just see how that goes. Start saying yes to God in different ways. And if that becomes the habit of how you live your life, it's going to be crazy to see all the things that he can do in even a short amount of time.
Amen. All right, thank you, Cody. Henry, if you know Henry, he's a very thoughtful guy. He's often thinking. Irene and I, when we helped with some of the CPI training way back when he was a new grad, I remember everybody was hanging out, playing volleyball, whatever. And Henry's like in the corner with his journal, like thinking deep thoughts. It's like, oh, Henry's a thoughtful guy. So he's also an amazing cook, actually. And so I think that it's fitting that he's sort of the Gordon Ramsay figure in Let's Cook This. Just anyway. So
I would say I'm full of thoughts. No, not about thoughtful, but first slide is blank. I didn't put up a family photo because I wasn't planning to introduce it, but my wife told me, hey, why is there no family photo? So there she is, in person, in flesh. Hi, Christine. We have a little daughter too, but she's not here. But this room is really neat because this was my first ever Bible study at UCLA was actually right here. So I was sitting around that section. So that's really neat. I feel really privileged to be able to give the message to you today here. So show of hands, really quick. Okay, show of hands. How many of you guys recycle? Okay, just keep your hands up. It's a little less than I thought, actually. But okay, how many of you guys, keep your hands up, believe that your recycling makes a big difference? Okay, all right, yeah, that's what I expected, that's what I expected. I'm gonna sort of cement that a little bit further. So I read that 21%, only 21% of all the recycles from the residential areas, like stuff that you sort, actually make it to recycling. Okay, rest of it doesn't make it. Okay, plastic, 5 to 6%. Okay, only gets they're the ones that gets recycled. Rest are in the landfill, or they get burned, or we dump it in South America for them to deal with. So giant global scale problem, right? The environment, right? And then there's me and you recycling, sorting yet another bottle. Okay, how are you feeling? All right. Are you feeling maybe whether I recycle or not, what difference am I gonna make? Right? Okay. Now maybe in recycling, yeah, sure. Whether I do that or not the most consequential to our day-to-day life. But don't we kind of feel the similar sort of sentiment maybe in our school, maybe in our workplaces, and maybe in our obedience to God, right? Like Jesus tells us, the Great Commandment and the Great Commission. He says, love one another, make disciples, save them, all the nations to the ends of the earth. Giant global scale problem. So, you go out there like Cody and the students, Bruin Walk or Truesdale Walkway, a lot of students walking back and forth from class to class. And then you're there with a bunch of cold drinks to do the cold ones for the end time for 6 hours. And then on a good day, right, you get maybe one or two decent conversations, and then you get really encouraged. And it's good to do it. But maybe there are times that I'm thinking, whether I'm there or not, what difference am I going to make? What difference will that one conversation make to the Great Commission? What difference will it make that I'm out there today? Right? So today's passage, we're going to be covering the feeding of the 5,000. It's an amazing miracle, but the focus here is actually about the disciples' response to an enormous problem that they're told to tackle. And here, we see that they ask the very same question. What difference are we going to make, Jesus? Oh, oops, sorry. And then Jesus takes this dramatic moment and answers this question, and he teaches this lesson. Don't be Philip, be Andrew. And he wants to tell the same thing to us really, really badly, because this is the only miracle that is recorded in all four Gospels. So let's read, and then pay attention to Philip and Andrew in particular as we read. John 6, 1 through 14. After this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias. And a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. And Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. Lifting up his eyes then, And seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" He said this to test him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, "There is a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But what are they for so many?" Jesus said, "Have the people sit down." Now there was much grass in the place, so the man sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when he had given thanks, he distributed them to those who were seated, so also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, he told his disciples, "Gather up the leftover fragments, that nothing may be lost." So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the 5 barley loaves left by those who had eaten. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." Okay, so some context here, right? Jesus is trying to get away from the crowd here, right? It says here, Jesus, he's been healing the sick, he's doing all this work, so he's trying to get away from the people and the crowd to have this quiet recharge time, his life group with his disciples. It's like time to take some break, recoup, lower the RPM. Great. So they get there, and what do they find? They find the crowd. The crowd followed them anyway. So here, Jesus turns to Philip and asks, "Philip, how are we going to get rid of these guys?" No, he doesn't like that. Jesus is not me. I would totally say that. But Jesus is not me, right? He says, "Hey, how are we going to feed these guys?" By the way, quick side point. I love this picture of Jesus where he doesn't insist on his own schedule or needs. Right? Instead, he's interruptible. He sees the present reality and the needs of those around him, and he always leans in, and that's love. Right? Because love is interruptible. That's how we measure love. Our schedules are so full. Some of our calendars, it's packed. I've seen it. There's like triple booked. It's like triple booked. And it's so full with classes, studying, gym, exams, clubs, homework. Yeah, there's a lot that we have to get to. And they're all delicately balanced. So then one interruption can have an avalanche effect on our calendar, right? But then Jesus, look at Jesus. He was really busy too. He was really, really tired. And yet, he is so interruptible. So how interruptible are you, right? Who are the people that you need to be interrupted by and interrupted for? Who is it that God is maybe calling you to love in this way this week? So going back to the text, Jesus asks the disciples to feed this big crowd. So Andrew and Philip, what do they see? Well, they see 5,000 men, right? Verse 10. Crowd is recorded as 5,000 men. With women and children, we're talking maybe 10,000 or 20,000 upper bounds. It's a lot of people. So to kind of help you imagine the scale, 10,000 is the size of UCLA and USC freshman class combined. Okay, so now how would you have reacted to this question from Jesus? Like if you were one of the disciples, maybe you think it's a joke. Like surely not, Jesus. Like you're asking this of me? Right? Maybe you think Jesus is just building up the tension. It's a rhetorical question. You know, he's building up the anticipation before the grand miracle that he usually does. So you're just waiting and staring. But then he's just staring back at you. And then it hits, right? Jesus is seriously asking this of us. So let's turn to a couple people around you and share. Was there a time when you encountered a task or responsibility that felt way beyond your capabilities? Okay? Just describe that moment. What went through your mind? What were you feeling? Take a couple minutes to do that really quick. Let's start bringing it in. Yeah. Well, I guess there's a lot, huh? There's a lot to talk about. So I'm not sure what you shared, but I'm guessing maybe you shared some sense of feeling overwhelmed or stressed or anxious, or maybe some thoughts like, dude, this is way beyond me. Why are they asking me? Can't be done. I just can't do it. Ask that guy. You know. Well, maybe that's what the disciples felt too, right? When Jesus called them to feed this big crowd. You know, Philip and Andrew sees this crowd, and they say the same thing. What difference are we going to make? So here's the thing. Jesus calls all Christians today, you and me, all the disciples, to feed an even bigger crowd, right? Just our campuses. Jesus calls, like just UCL and USC, right? We're surrounded by the multitudes, and then aren't they in need? Like, I'm not talking about food here, right? UCLA, you guys have awesome dining hall food, okay? No complaining. It's better than a lot of restaurants out there. And USC, you guys have food. You guys have food, Okay, practice your gratitude. Okay, the need isn't the food. Okay, I'm not talking about food, but I'm talking about spiritual needs. Okay, spiritual needs. Okay, we look around and so many college students are lost, longing for something more, looking for their identity, their purpose, their bearing in this world, and they're so far from God, and ultimately they're looking in the wrong places. Just a freshman class, right? 10,000. You add that sophomores, juniors, seniors, grad students, and then there's 20 million college students just in the United States. Okay, and then Jesus doesn't stop there, right? He says, hey, Great Commission, go to the ends of the earth. Make disciples, love them, feed them all over the nations. So he turns to us and says, wow, look at this big crowd. How will we meet this need? What will we do about it? We have a big problem, and it's overwhelming. How do you feel? How are you going to go about responding to this? Now, some years ago, during Welcome Week at UCLA, I was out by the Bruin Bear right out there handing out last-minute flyers for boba board games that was happening in this room. Okay, the event had already started, actually, but there weren't that many people, and so we thought, well, maybe some of us will go out there and try and catch last-minute stragglers. The campus was pretty dead, okay? But then all of a sudden, a throng of freshmen just started walking by. It turns out that they just came out of Poly Pavilion after the chancellor's address. So it was all the freshmen heading down towards Westwood afterwards, towards the block party that happens every year. And then it kind of dawned on me that, wow, there's a lot of students at UCLA. I don't know if you've ever had that experience. 7,000 people walking by right in front of you in a span of 5 minutes. And it's amazing how much you can hear. I'd hear snippets of their conversation as they walked by, and what I would hear is them, sharing like, I'm so excited about this college life that I'm going to start. Some would share about the frat parties that are happening that week. Some are already talking about that guy or a girl that they hooked up with for the night. Some are anxious, actually most are anxious about their classes and internships and research. And then I wondered, wow, I wonder how many of them knows Jesus, right? Here I was trying to bring a few more students to boba board games. But then it turns out it's not really about that. It's not about filling our seats. It's not about our attendance and our fellowship. It's about people that are lost, that needs to find Jesus. And at that moment, I saw a diverging path standing right here to my left, this big river of crowd following a path towards Westwood. And you stretch that out for eternity, and you see what? Like a pretty dark place, forever away from God. And then to my right, it's a basement. And it's a chance for them to encounter Jesus, a chance for them to encounter his people, and their eternity potentially forever changed. And there, I wanted to kind of shout, with the hope, like, only if you would turn around. I wanted to shout at them like, guys, that's not the way. There's nothing over there. Like, the block party is so lame. I don't know if you've ever been there. It's so lame. But parties, career, money, sex, all that stuff, that's going to leave you feeling emptier and lonelier than ever before. Like, I know, I've experienced chasing after those and even getting some of those. But, I knew better. Like, if I were to shout at them, right? I'm just going to be driving them further towards block party faster than I can count to 10, right? So, of course, I didn't shout. But that was the moment that broke my heart. I felt helpless. It hit me seeing the entire freshman class before my eyes that the problem was big. The need was greater, and we needed to do something about it. Only I wasn't sure how it was going to make a difference. So when you see the scale of the crowd and the problem, what comes to your mind? How do you usually respond? How do we usually respond? Right, in my problem, I got the problem. I understood it. I even wanted to do something about it. But then my first thought was, well, what difference am I going to make? Well, it is at this point that we have a chance to be Andrew and not Philip. Right? But then, turns out, we are Philip with our excuses. When Jesus asks me to obey in some way, I tend to be very quick with my excuses and reasons as to why I can't. What are those potential excuses? As a thought exercise, let's take a little boy here. He's not even one of the disciples. It's just a little boy, right? It says here that he had some ordinary lunch. Verse 9, like 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. Imagine 1 filet-o-fish. Okay, what potential excuses do you think he could have given to Andrew and to Jesus? Okay, so let's spend some time discussing what are those excuses. Okay, so let's spend like 3 minutes. I'm sure there's a lot. I mean, hopefully none of you said, because dog ate my homework or anything, but here's some excuses that I came up with. Okay, 4 categories. Little old me, okay? This isn't enough for a crowd like this. Okay, it's so shameful to bring so little, right? Self-preservation. If I offer this up, am I gonna have enough? Am I gonna have enough to eat? Okay, passivity. Well, someone else will step up. You know, it's a big crowd. I don't have to be the one. Cynicism, like, oh, it's not gonna make a difference, so what's the point? And then I'm sure there's many more. Well, we have many excuses before obedience. And it's not only when it comes to big obedience, like feeding this whole crowd, but aren't these the very same excuses that we give in the small and everyday things? Like, okay, not wanting to try and reach our campuses, trying out tabling, dining halls, or whatever that we've tried in this past year, like cold ones, vertical jumps, or sports. Maybe there's a little bit of that cynicism voice that says, hey, there's no point. What difference will all this make? It's not gonna get anywhere. Going even smaller, saying hi to a classmate and try and be friends. Maybe there's a little old me speaking to you. Hey, you're really lame. It's gonna be awkward. That person's gonna judge you. He's gonna think you're a weirdo. Who are you to try and make friends with that guy? Right? Going even smaller, just showing up on time for church setup or church service. Maybe there's a bit of passivity. You know, there's like 80 people here. I'm sure one less of me, not gonna make a huge difference. The point is that it's not that the task is too big, but that our hearts are too small with many excuses. What are some common excuses that you tend to come up with that hinders you from offering up your 5 loaves and 2 fish? For me, it's little old me and cynicism. How about you? Okay, so what's Philip's excuse? Philip says, look, Jesus, 200 denarii would not be enough. This can't be done. 200 denarii, by the way, is 200 days' wage. So imagine your yearly salary, and then IRS comes and then takes away your tax. So you're left with about 200 days, right? It's amazing. He's able to calculate how much money and food was required to feed these people and then say, well, we don't have enough, so can't do anything about it, right? And his response is actually very practical and very realistic. Now, being realistic and practical is not bad. Actually, most of the time, we should make our decisions based on that, right? That's reasonable. But in this case, Philip's assessment was correct, but ultimately so wrong, because his scope of reality, turns out, was way too small. He didn't account for God, which is the biggest reality, and in the end, he was just being cynical about what could be done. That's all that is. Cynicism is practicality and realism minus God. When it comes to obedience and love, practicality and realism is simply a guise for cynicism. Don't fall for it because it sounds so right, it sounds so intuitive, and it sounds so smart. But it just looks at the problem and it doesn't do anything. It scoffs and is moved to inaction. In other words, it stops you from moving toward God and the needs in front of you. And ultimately, nothing happens. And the problem's still there. And you're feeling all smart, declaring to everybody, hey, there's no point. I already know that nothing can be done. Well, who are you to say that God can't do or can do something? You know, when did you become the judge as to what God will or won't do? That kind of practicality and realism without account for God, and what he could do is just godlessness, right? Turns out cynicism is just godlessness. So then, can you relate to this sentiment? Nothing can be done. This is beyond me. There's no point. Are you a cynical person? Okay, so don't be like Philip with his cynicism and excuses that leads to doing nothing, but instead be like Andrew. But before we move on, turn to the person next to you and say, hey, guys, don't be Philip. Don't be Philip, okay? Don't be Philip. Come on, Gen LA, don't be Philip, all right? Okay, so how can we be Andrew? Okay, remember, Jesus said, don't be Philip, but be Andrew. He says, I don't know, Jesus. I don't think it's enough. But there's this boy with filet of fish. So they both agree that the problem is big, right? It's unsolvable with their current resources. But one key difference here is that Philip focuses on what they don't have and then gets stuck. But Andrew focuses on what they do have and then starts to do something. It may seem like a small difference, right? Filet of fish, definitely not gonna feed 20,000 people, but it's a crucial difference. Like, it's a difference between inaction and action, difference between disobedience and obedience. It's a difference between nothing and something, right? Because something is better than nothing. When it comes to offering up what we have to God, I may not have much, but that's still better than nothing. And so I will offer it up and see what God can do with it. So back in my senior year, me and my friends wanted to reach our campus one last time before we graduated. So we had this idea of putting on a secret retreat for our friends and for anyone on the campus, for that matter, that were interested, so that we could share the gospel in some winsome way and share the reason for our faith. Okay, big problem though. None of us had ever planned an event like this. We didn't know how to work together because we never ever have worked together before this. We didn't know what content to put up. We weren't musical. We weren't eloquent. We had no talent. We were called a talentless class. And we were generally inexperienced in presenting the gospel in some winsome way. Okay, so all our reasons told us, hey, this is not going to work. It's not worth the effort. 4 weeks into planning, that voice was pretty convincing. But we just kept trying, did our best. And we prayed every week together that some of our friends would come. Some of our friends would somehow hear the gospel and then encounter Jesus. By the end, we put up the retreat. Thankfully, we had a lot of help. And though we didn't execute it perfectly, and we messed up here and there, a couple of people actually made salvation decisions. And we had many spiritual conversations we wouldn't have had otherwise. And who knows, right? It's been about almost a decade, and I wonder what role that those conversations and that experience had in each of their spiritual journeys today and their relationship with God. So I look back and think, man, I am so glad that we offered something up to God that year instead of nothing. It wasn't much, it wasn't perfect, but God worked through it. God works through what we offer. Right? So we have a big problem, we have our excuses. How should we respond? We should offer what we have, and God will, we should offer whatever we have. So then, what keeps you from offering to God your 5 loaves and 2 fish? Right? What if Andrew and the boy responded like Philip and didn't offer up anything to Jesus? What do you think would have happened? Like, would the crowd have eaten? Maybe the boy would have eaten. Not sure. Maybe. Probably not. Because what we do know about God is that he chooses to work with people, and he chooses to work with whatever they have to offer. And we see this pattern all throughout the Bible. Right? David and Goliath, right? Goliath was undefeated, unmatched, dishonoring God's name. Israelites didn't do anything. They were too afraid. It wasn't until David offered up his 5 stone and a sling that Goliath was defeated. Right? What about the Exodus story? Moses in Midian giving excuses to God. Deliverance is still not happening. It wasn't until Moses actually obeyed and went to Egypt that stuff started happening and the deliverance happened. Birth of the church, right? Literally multiplied out of some ordinary, uneducated young dudes that spent a lot of time bickering with each other about who's the greatest and 90% of the time confused about Jesus' teaching. And yet, through their faithfulness, the church explodes and we're here today. That's the pattern. God works through whatever we offer. So conversely, is it possible that we're holding back God's work and the blessing that he wants to unleash in our lives and in the world through us because we are not offering up our 5 loaves and 2 fish? Going back to the story, right? The boy doesn't give in to his potential excuses, and he offers what he has. Jesus takes that small lunch and then does something spectacular. The miracle is not in the food. Okay, there's nothing special about the bread and fish, but it's about in whose hand the food was placed in whose hand that it was multiplied in. So what is this showing? We have an infinite God. When we place something in his hands, he can multiply it far beyond our imagination. So God can multiply. So why can we respond with faith and obedience like Andrew? Why can we offer something up even though it's not enough? It's because God can multiply. If God couldn't take little and make much, then for sure, right? Philip is correct. Like we have every legitimate excuses and reasons as to why we couldn't feed the crowd. In the world, there's limited resources. We have a cap in our abilities, in our time, in our energy. There's a limit. But life has a way of throwing problems at us, and some are pretty big. The expectation is to do your best, and you don't have enough, then you don't have enough. That's the reality of this world. So cynicism is a very real outlook. We just got to make do what you can do, and yield what you can. And that, if that's enough, that's great. But if not, well, that's too bad. It can be a pretty hopeless and even desperate worldview, maybe even paralyzing, and makes us fear life's challenges. But this way of viewing the world and operating in this world is so ingrained in us. It's so natural, because it's just kind of true. But we have a God that multiplies. We have a God of infinite resources. So then, it simplifies our job. Our job is not to have enough, but it's just to obey. That means that it's our job to offer up whatever we have. It's God's job to multiply it. Don't worry about not having enough to solve the entire problem. It would be pretty ridiculous to say to Jesus, "Oh, Jesus, I don't have enough time or talent to make disciples of every single person in the world, so I can't do anything. I'm not going to do anything." No, our job is to offer up whatever we have, and God's going to multiply it, and He will get His work done. So the implication here is that everyone in this room has something to offer. Everyone has the ability to bless others or withhold that blessing. No one can say, "Little old me, I have nothing to offer." That's just not a valid excuse, because we have an infinite God who can multiply even the tiniest of offerings. Now, you can't multiply nothing, right? God is still a God of logic. He can't multiply 0 and get something out of it. He still end up with a 0. But just a little bit, tiny fraction of something that has a potential to be multiplied and grow exponentially. So have you experienced that in your life, in your obedience? The little being used to a disproportionate effect. So when I had graduated, I decided to be a church plant intern. Joe mentioned that, right? And I took a gap year, helped start a church in our Pittsburgh city. Not sure, right? What do you think? Like church plant intern, right? It must be really thoughtful. But I was really just a dude, fresh out of college. No skills, no know-hows, no experiences. Probably a liability about 60% of the time in our ministry. I was sick 40% of the time. It was pretty tough and challenging. But I was a warm body, willing to do anything. Okay, and by the end of the year, we didn't have a lot of tangible results in terms of ministry. We didn't have a whole lot of students, awesome conversion stories, or some crazy way in which God worked in that city and our campus. But what I did experience was that my heart multiplied for the students in Pittsburgh. It grew for the whole city. And my understanding of God and my relationship with Him deepened. And even now, I have something to do with that church in Pittsburgh. And to my surprise, that wasn't the end. A few years down the line, I get a random text from one of the students that I did course 101 with. He said, "Hey, guess what? I decided to follow Jesus." And he got baptized right before his graduation. One of the guys who had left our fellowship actually came back, turns out, some years later. And I found this out not too long ago, and he became a staff mentor at Pittsburgh Church. He bought a house for the single bros to do single bros ministry. And through those updates, and I would hear many different students who have come and gone through our Pittsburgh churches. Their lives changed. Some became CPIs. Some helped start our youth ministry, and through that, the youth in that city were impacted. Their families were blessed as they reached out to their own families, and so on. Like, there's a church in Pittsburgh. And what I see is that God used the little that we had to offer that first year, and He used it disproportionately to bless many. So even recently, like, I hear similar stories, similar patterns in LA. Like, I heard about Tommy going out to campus for GCI. He wasn't sure what it will come to. He was a little bit cynical about it. But he happened to run into one of the guys he knew, reconnected, started Course 101, and that friend became Christian. And who knows how God will use that friend to bless others down the road. And just yesterday, right, the UCLA students hosting a lot of their friends in college one last time before the year ended. And who knows Who knows how that will shape and change the eternal trajectories of their lives and the lives around them. So, what do you have? Like, what do you have? College students, like, what do you have? You might not have a lot of money. I mean, there's a period I was just eating a single Cliff Bar for lunch because I had to save up for rent and tuition. But I heard about EBT, so maybe you guys have something. What about time? You have time to offer between classes, right? During your lunch times, meeting a new person or making a new friend. And then maybe it's helping out with some of the outreach efforts, right? I was so encouraged this past year for all that y'all have done, like doing GCI or cold ones, right? That took time, right? That took time. But wasn't it worth it for all the gospel seeds sown and the new relationships that we formed, the conversations that moved them even an inch closer to Jesus? Do you have a car that you could drive people in? Like Cody, right? That can be a blessing. Gas prices are up. It's a blessing. An apartment that you could host people in, like the seniors, hosting friends, underclassmen, different mentors. Isn't that a time that multiplies not only your skills in hosting and cooking, but in your blessing and in the memories of those around you? Postgrads, like, what do you have? You have more money, right? You have a roof over your head. You have access to workplaces, coworkers that not everyone has access to. You have more experience, knowledge, wisdom, and at the very least, aren't we all just warm and able-bodied? You can be an encouraging presence. Who knows? Like, I've heard of people getting impacted by seeing some men setting up chairs every Sunday morning. Like, we could do that. So instead of focusing on, I can't serve God because I don't have blank, or, I'm not blank enough, or the problem is way too big. Instead, think about what you do have and what you could offer. Whatever it might be from Jesus' perspective, you do have enough. You are blank enough because he can fill in the rest. You also have other brothers and sisters with you. You're not alone. You have the church, and you have Jesus right alongside you, ready to feed and bless the multitude. Remember, it's our job to offer up whatever we have, and it's God's job to multiply it. God has a vision for your life. He wants you to be a blessing. He wants to rescue this world through you. It's just that you have to be willing to just offer up what you have. The miracle may not be immediate or apparent. There may be a lull, moments of discouragement. It's going to be tough, but God is multiplying and he is working through all that you offer and try. So the question, what difference am I going to make? Turns out that's the wrong question to ask, because Jesus makes all the difference through us. So, who are the ones in your life that God is calling you to bless? What are some excuses that you give to God? What can you offer up to God? So let's spend 5 minutes answering these questions, and then I'd like you to sort of write a prayer based on them. Specific prayer for that person or people that came to your mind, prayer of repentance for the excuses that you've been giving, and then a heartful prayer of dedication for what you want to offer up to God. Okay, and then let's pray, and then the praise band will come up to wrap us up.